A pattern: young men going to bars, then disappearing for months, only to be found drowned. Now this was the pattern of smiley face serial killer theory, but is this urban legend or is this true? Today we're going to lay out the facts and you can decide. Welcome back to Just Another Mystery, the channel where we talk about true crime, cold cases, cults and mysteries. If this sounds like your jam, make sure you are subscribing. Please remember that viewer discretion is advised because these do have scenes of a distressing nature. So I'm going to start off and let you know that this whole thing is very, very intriguing. So whilst you have the authorities claiming that this is an urban legend, the theory is based on factual information on real life cases. And I thought, actually, let's dive into this together because I've never heard of this. And I bet you haven't either. So let's talk about where the theory began. This will be a little summary before we get into the nitty-gritty. So, two ex-detectives from NYPD called Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, they both announced in 2008 that they thought that there was a serial killer on the loose called the Smiley Face serial killer, or it was a gang of murderers murdering with the same kind of intent and leaving a mark behind of a smiley face graffiti. When they released this, they released that over 40 different cases all had similarities between them, and they felt that there was foul play, so they brought it to the media's attention. So this is where the theory just exploded in the US. In the UK, I had never heard of this. Now, Gannon and Duarte actually went to the public and they said, look, these guys that are getting killed are all being found in the same way. And they are all white, they're all athletic, they're all college age, so they're 20, 21, and they are all then found in a body of water after going missing for some time. So the smiley face wasn't even just the creepy bit. The connections with the actual similarities of the cases didn't help. But I think before we get too far in this story, we need to understand where it all first started. What was the case that even started Gannon and Duarte looking into this? Well, to look at that, we need to go back to 1997. Patrick McNeil was a 21-year-old student at Fareham University in New York. Patrick was known for being quite popular. He was known by his roommates as a bit of a womanizer and also a very altruistic character. So he was very involved in charities, in charity events, and he was also very involved in sports. So he was able to look after himself quite well. And he had loads and loads of friends. He was generally quite popular and doing quite well at school. Now, Patrick McNeil went to help a friend when they were hosting some sort of charity get-together in Manhattan on February 16th, 1997. During this party, Patrick was having a lot of fun. Obviously, he had went and he had friends there, so they were all getting involved with the scene and what was going on there. Now, obviously, with it being a party and Patrick was 21, he was drinking. The accounts on how much Patrick drank varied. So some people said he had drunk a lot, but others had said no, he didn't drink loads. And in the early hours of the morning, Patrick was ready to go home. He had a girl who he had met in the club. He walked outside and seemingly waited for her. Several witnesses noted that he waited for a little while, but obviously ended up getting bored and started to stumble back to wherever he wanted to go. Now, Patrick was very intoxicated with something. Even though people said that he didn't drink that much, he was stumbling. He would take a few steps and he would fall over. Take a few steps and he would fall over. He was seen on CCTV and by witnesses to exit the bar and walk towards the 90th Street. And once he turned round that corner, nothing ever appeared again. Patrick just went missing into thin air. No one could find him, no one knew where he was, and this launched an immediate New York police investigation. Now, NYPD had a large amount of volunteers, and both NYPD and the volunteers all went out into New York and were searching for Patrick. There was a giant manhunt to make sure that Patrick was okay, and this went on for days. They also handed out 10,000 posters so that Patrick's face was known throughout the whole city. Not only that, but they spoke with all these witnesses. Now, a really interesting thing that came out of these interviews was one of the witnesses who had seen Patrick falling over, getting up, walking a little bit more, and seeming very, very intoxicated. One of them was so concerned, they watched him for a while, and they noticed that a car was slowly following Patrick. And because they were so concerned with this, they took a partial reg plate and they actually had it recorded on them and reported it to the police because it was so suspicious. Now, the other witnesses also noted concern when they saw Patrick. They were very concerned for him because he was just so intoxicated. He was struggling to stand up. He obviously was trying to fight it, but remember, this guy is very athletic, he's 21 years old, and he probably had gone to a lot of parties. So being that intoxicated was quite hard to do, where you can't even stand up. But after months, the New York PD were still not making headway, and they started to get pressure from political partners. Now, these political parties were placing pressure on the New York department and saying, hey, how comes you guys haven't given us any answers? This guy has been missing and you've got no leads. What's going on? So the New York department actually started to create excuses, like saying that maybe he had had enough of school and just walked off. Maybe he didn't want to be found and just went hiding, so that's why they couldn't find him. Some police officers also stated to the press that perhaps he had taken drugs and he had just wanted to disappear out of shame. Now, his family, throughout this entire situation, denied these claims. And they were quite appalled by why these people were making these claims, because essentially they were trying to degrade Patrick's character when he had never done anything wrong to them. So the search still had to go on, and because of the witness stating that there was potentially a car following Patrick, this case initially was deemed as potential foul play. This is where Kevin Gannon was brought onto the case as the detective. Because there was potentially foul play, the detectives needed to be a part of this search. And in searching, Kevin was very suspicious regarding the car. But eventually, on April 7th, 1997, 2 months after Patrick McNeil's disappearance, Patrick's body was found underneath the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, Kevin noted that at the scene, Patrick's body lacked what they call slippage, and this is common of drowning victims because the skin actually gets a little bit slimy, and that's the slippage. And if they are not drowned or they don't die in water, they sometimes do not have that, and Patrick's body did not have any slippage. Another strange thing to note was that there seemed to be burns around Patrick's neck. Now, this was not consistent of falling from the Brooklyn Bridge and perhaps hitting yourself, because how would you hit your neck and burn it in that way? Now, the third element that was very, very strange was that the blood had settled in a way that indicated that Patrick had died face down. However, his body was found face up. And to top off all of these weird factors, Patrick's body was found 12 miles from where he disappeared. Whilst Kevin Gannon really suspected this to be foul play, he wanted to push the NYPD to conduct what was called a lawman search, and this way they could search for the partial reg plate and see about finding any potential suspects. However, the NYPD announced that it was too expensive at $1,200 and that they refused to do this. So the NYPD wanted to shut down the case very quickly and ended up announcing that it was no foul play, even though there were suspicious circumstances. Now, this resolution of no foul play did not satisfy Kevin Gannon because there were so many issues with this case that didn't add up to it being a suicide. This was not someone that would have just jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge. That just wasn't part of what Patrick would do. Patrick was doing very well in school. He was very popular. He was very athletic. There had no reason for him to have done that. And also his injuries and where he was found were suspicious. Kevin Gannon actually vowed to keep looking into this case once he had left the NYPD. And a few years later, because he had to accept it whilst he was in the NYPD, he retired and he brought in another retired detective called Anthony Duarte. Now, these two decided, actually, let's look into this case in particular, but then let's look into cases that start to match. And during this time, they did find over 40 cases that all seemed to match, with the individual leaving a bar or a club, the individual being a white male college student that was popular and athletic. All of them seemed to go missing for a few months, and then they would be found drowned. Now, Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte had theories that perhaps these men had been drugged, because all of them, with the witness statements whilst they were going missing, seemed particularly intoxicated, and not in the manner that you would normally see with drunkenness. So where Patrick McNeil was involved, he was literally struggling to walk, and there is absolutely no way that over 40 people could have been that sloshed that they fell into water sources and then manipulated their own bodies. It's just bizarre. In 2002, Chris Jenkins was another university student who went missing after going to a party. Chris was white male, athletic, and in college, so college age, but he went missing for 4 months. Now, when Chris Jenkins' body was found, his body was quite clearly showing signs of a struggle, and also his arms and legs were crossed in a way that indicated manipulation of the body following his death. The authorities initially stated that the struggle could have happened during drowning. However, the struggle was not consistent. The signs of struggle were not consistent with that of drowning, so that didn't quite make sense. Now, Chris's family also completely opposed the local authorities. Where the local authorities announced it as no foul play, the fact that the body was showing signs of a struggle and had been posed was enough evidence to push the family that they were not happy with those answers. So the family, Gannon and Duarte all started working very closely together. In 2008, after they announced that they believed that there was a serial killer going across the US, or a gang of murderers, or perhaps a gang initiation, they had so much media attention. People started to get worried. People started to question the authorities. Why did they shut down these investigations so quickly? And also, is this real? The authorities adamantly denied this. They said this is of course not real, and this is an urban legend. This is an urban legend that has started with Anthony Duarte and Kevin Gannon. They've created havoc, etc. But other people were not convinced. They were like, actually, these guys seem to have really added something up here. This doesn't look right. So let's start to look into it. So now we're going to move on to the next section, and that is, what are the reasons that could debunk this theory? And if you are enjoying it so far, make sure you leave a comment down below on your thoughts. So, because the hype for this got so big, in 2010, the Center for Homicide Research published a paper naming 18 different reasons on why this theory could be debunked. And don't worry, I've read it all for you, and we're gonna go through it. Now, whilst some of the points I can't personally contest, some of them I will be contesting with you. So if you are interested, I am going to be listing them all right now. Number 1, they noted that the graffiti was not always done at the time of the murders. Now, with serial killers, they would usually leave a tag directly after, marking their work. Now, these graffitis that were found, these smiley faces, were dated because the paint can be dated based on when it was sprayed. And some of these graffiti marks were made a few months after or a few months before. So this point, fully solid. I cannot dispute this. Number 2, the graffiti was not always consistent and also didn't always match. Now, this again I cannot contest because yes, the graffiti was different types of smiley faces, they never used a singular colour, and sometimes it wasn't there at all. So the smiley face element absolutely is a huge question mark in this theory. Number 3, none of the smiley faces match. Now, they've already covered this in number 2. Again, I can't contest this. Number 4, and this is something I didn't mention because I don't think this was a part or the bigger part of the theory, is that a few of the scenes had the word Sinsiwa graffitied on local walls. Now, what I didn't know, and what you might not know, is that Sinsiwa is a regular graffiti word that means rattlesnake or home of the young eagle. So this was something that was quite a common graffiti and pretty much was dismissed. I again can't contest this, and I don't think there's any credence to Sinsiwa being graffitied at any of these murder scenes. Number 5, that there was no criteria to what distance these smiley faces had to be towards the sign in the theory. So whether it was 5 meters away or 500 meters away, you would probably find a smiley face, because you, as well as me, have probably walked down the street one day and seen a smiley face on a wall somewhere. And this is just something that happens. People like to graffiti smiley faces. Don't know why, but it happens. So the fact of the smiley face being linked to the crime scene was very, very minimal. But I think actually when you're thinking about Anthony Duarte and Kevin Gannon, they probably brought up the smiley faces to help get media attention. This is something that the media latched onto because suddenly it becomes not only a gruesome story, it becomes something that's advertisable. So I do think that the smiley face out of this paper has fairly been debunked. However, now we get on to the juicy stuff. Number 6, the Center for Homicide Research claims that there were no signs of a struggle at any of these incidents. That's just factually untrue, because several different incidents had signs of a struggle. Even the local authorities noted it. Whether they had had a struggle and they thought it was because of drowning, that is still a struggle. Whether it's a struggle that you do not think is pertinent to your case, that's still a struggle. So this number 6 on this paper is completely invalid, and I'm surprised that they put that on the paper. Number 7, homicidal drowning is rare. Okay, but doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So number 7 is such a bizarre case to make, because just because it hasn't happened before, it doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. It's like we didn't used to have electric cars and now we do. Just because we didn't used to have them doesn't mean that we can't have them now. It's such a bizarre statement to why this couldn't be a theory that's true. Number 8. Not all evidence washes away is the pretty much summary of this. However, in this summary, they also note that blood does wash away, most likely. And the theory is not based on evidence going missing in the water. It's based on the bodies being found in the water. So actually, number 8 is completely invalid as well, because they are not stating that there's loads of evidence that gets washed away. They're saying that people are staging the bodies in water. That is very, very different. It's like apples and oranges. It's just different. Number 9, again, is a really weird one, is that they said drownings do not fit a serial killer motive. Okay, so so you're basically saying it cannot be a serial killer or a gang of murderers because someone has been found in a body of water. That is so bizarre, because obviously if you were a serial killer or a gang of murderers, you would stage something that would be least suspicious. And if they will discount anything in water, then you would probably do that. So it's just really strange that they added this onto the list. Number 10, confessions by correctional inmates are deemed to be untrue because a lot of correctional inmates do lie. They're known for lying to increase notoriety and also just to get a little bit more fame. There was only one incident that basically this was brought on by, Chris Jenkins. There was an individual within a correctional facility that claimed to have killed Chris Jenkins, which in itself was really bizarre because everyone said that it was an accident, it wasn't a murder, but this guy claimed to have killed him. And whilst no one has said that that's definitely the case, obviously the fact that someone came out and said, I have killed him, shows that there are more people that think this is suspicious, and more, even criminals saw the case and they were like, no dude, that's suspicious. Like, I'm gonna jump on this hype. And yes, I don't think the people who are already arrested and owning up to murders necessarily did it, but I'm not saying that they did. And just because people are known for lying doesn't necessarily mean that the case never happened. So again, it's a moot point. Number 11, the general environment is conducive to a drowning. Okay, but what about the months of going missing? What about the struggle signs? What about the posed bodies? This is just, again, a really bizarre point to put in this paper. And let me put on my tin hat here. It does sound like they're covering something up. Number 12, they basically say the fact that it's males and not females does not support the serial killer theory. And I contest this as well, because yes, it does, because there is a theme. And for serial killers, you often need a pattern, whether it is workers of the night, or it is women, or it is men, or it is, families. There is always a pattern, and there is a clear pattern here. So yes, it is conducive to the theory. There is absolutely no reason that this would debunk the theory again. In number 13, they bring up in La Crosse, Wisconsin, authorities have stopped over 50 people falling in the water and drowning under the similar kind of circumstances. However, again, just throwing out a statistic and saying that it's it's common to drown, does not explain the other inconsistencies. So with the going missing or the struggle signs on their bodies, this just doesn't add up and is not a strong enough point to debunk this theory. Number 14, and I'm not even joking here, they say that men falling into rivers drunk and drowning is a well-documented event. So why would you look into it further, pretty much? Again, I couldn't test this because actually, okay, like, yeah, it might be a well-documented event, but it doesn't mean that it's happened at these events in particular. So if this is what's stopping you from looking into these cases further, then I'm suspicious, because that sounds like very lazy police work. Number 15, that many cases are suspected auto-assassination. So this is where people drink so much and become so inebriated that they become so depressed. And when you're depressed, you may do things that you don't want to do. If you get my drift, I don't think YouTube would like me if I say it. So they suspect that people are getting so drunk that they get so depressed and then they act on that. Again, this is speculation, and why is this included in a paper? Yes, this is something to add to thought. Maybe it's food for thought, but it is again speculation. It's not based on any evidence. So this again does nothing to debunk the theory. Number 16, the malicious drugging of victims is unsupported. Now, let's just clear this up here, because they use the word malicious. They are basically saying, yes, these people who had died and under suspicious circumstances were drugged, but was it malicious or was it not? Was it intentional? What was going on? You know? For number 17, I'm going to have to read it out to you because I will not remember any of this. The presence of GHB, which is gamma hydroxybutyric acid, does not indicate malicious drugging, as the body naturally creates this and decomposition accumulates it faster. I can't contest this because I'm not smart, but it basically means that some of the drugs found in the system were this and could have been caused naturally by the body. It also indicates that there were potentially more, and these rates might have been higher than suspected, but they didn't go into detail here. Number 18, I think, is such a weird point. I'm like, okay. So they say that the drownings are not limited by region, but rather by climate, because there needs to be water. And I'm not even joking. This is genuinely on the Department of Homicide Research paper. I will link it down below for you to read. This is genuinely a reason that they are trying to debunk this theory. But yes, there will be water because they stage them in water, or, you know, that's the whole point of the theory, is that something's happening and then they're getting staged in water. They're not always drowning. But I mean, ultimately, it is for you to decide with your facts. I think I'm very clear on what I believe. I do think that the smiley face was a bit of a publicity stunt. However, I do think that they might be onto something, and there might genuinely be an active serial killer or an active gang of murderers throughout the US that no one knows about. But essentially, what do you think? Is this urban legend or is it not? If you like this video, make sure you subscribe, like, comment. It really helps me. I really found this case super fascinating. And if you like more of these ones that kind of get you thinking about, is it urban legend or not, then drop a comment down below and let me know. I'll see you next week.